back to Unported. Today we'll be talking about Bleach. Specifically the manga, not actually any of these games. Written by Taikubo starting in 2001, Bleach ran for roughly 15 years. I think it was like a week or two past the 15-year mark, from August 2001 until August 2016. Ran for 74 volumes and 686 chapters. Type started this after the cancellation of Zombie Powder, his first manga with Shonen Jump. As you can tell, that's long. That's a very long-running manga series. It's 74 volumes. That's a long time. So we're not going to cover all of that today. We're going to break it down into several videos covering each arc individually, and we'll see how that goes. Today in this video, we're going to cover volumes 1 through 8. That is the Substitute Soul Reaper arc, the first arc of the series. Follow that with 9 through 21, the Soul Society arc, 22 through 27, which is the Arrancar arc, and then we'll do 28 through 36, which is the Huecamundo arc, and we're gonna include the Turn Back to Pendulum, which is a single volume by itself. By volumes 37 through 48, which is the Fake Karakura Town arc, and it's the final arc of the Arrancar arc. 49 through 54, the Lost Agent arc. And then, I haven't actually read the 1000-Year Blood War arc, not completely. I've read the end of Bleach and I've read some of the beginnings of it, but I missed a lot of the middle stuff. So I haven't decided how I'm gonna break down the last 20 volumes from 55 to 74. I haven't figured out exactly how we're gonna break down that yet, but that's basically the structure. Right? We're gonna separate every arc into its own video. That way we can get a little bit more in depth with each one. Yeah. Quick overview for anyone who is unfamiliar with Bleach. The main characters are Ichigo Kurosaki. He is a teenager in high school. He can see ghosts at the beginning of the series, and he gets his powers from Rukia Kuchiki, who is the other main character of the series. She is a Soul Reaper, and she gives her power in a life and death situation. She gives her powers to Ichigo. Hime Inoue, I guess you could call that Ichigo's love interest, although he doesn't seem particularly like he has one. She definitely has an interest in him. She also gains powers later in this as we go on through the series. Soro Sato, I can't pronounce his first name very well, because you never use it. He goes by Chad the entire series. You never have to actually remember his first name, or any of his name really. It's just Chad. He gets a really big arm. It's pretty cool. I actually kind of I like him. He's a cool character. Boru Ishida, he's a Quincy, uses bow and arrow. And then some sort of main characters, but not entirely. Kisuke Urahara is a shopkeeper who has some connection to the Soul Society. You don't really know what that is at this point. Yoruichi, she's introduced at the very end of the arc. It's a black cat that can talk. Pretty funny, entertaining throughout the arc. Has a couple good jokes in there. I guess you can count Renji Abarai and Byakuya Kuchiki. They come at the very end of the arc. They're not really main characters for this arc, but they become main characters as we continue through the series, although I guess that's a little spoilery if you haven't read or seen. We also have Ichigo's father, Ishin? I think it's Ishin Kurosaki. We also have his sisters, Karin and Yuzu Kurosaki. There's also characters like Dan Kanoji. He has a whole volume basically dedicated to him, but he's not very important for the rest of the story, and you don't really see him after that. It's just a one-time thing, but he takes up a whole volume. It's incredibly annoying. My least favorite part of the series. Tatsuki, who's Ichigo's friend from childhood. Again, she has a bit of a bigger role here, but we move on from that very quickly. There's also Keigo, Mitsu, and Mizuru. I think that's it. But we see them a lot now, but they don't really last throughout the series. I don't think they're worth really discussing in too much depth. They're good to know, but they're kind of tertiary and later characters. They're not super important to the story, even in this arc, which is the arc that's seen the most. So now we're going to do a quick overview of each individual chapter. You're going to see some manga scenes on the screen for this, and then we'll come back and discuss the actual, what I think of the arc 1 as a whole. Volume 1 introduces us to Ichigo, a teenager with orange hair that can see ghosts. and Rukia, a Soul Reaper. She gets injured trying to protect Ichigo and his family from a hollow, resulting in her having to give her powers to Ichigo to save them. We learn that hollows are dead spirits that can't move on, but we don't really learn much more than that about the Bleach world. We're also introduced to Orihime. We learn her brother Sora is not only deceased but has turned into a hollow that is trying to kill her before Ichigo purifies him. The volume ends introducing us to Chad, who was brought into the family clinic by being seriously injured. Volume 2 opens with Chad having left the clinic and Ichigo looking for him. We learn the talking bird he has is a boy's soul trapped in it, being used by a hollow to trick people and kill them. We are introduced to the gates of hell here after Ichigo defeats the hollow. We also learn that Rukia's powers have not returned to her the way she was expecting them to. The back half of the volume introduces us to the concept of soul candy and is used to transform Ichigo into a soul reaper and put a temporary soul into his body. But the soul candy Rukia receives is faulty and contains a mod soul. The mod soul takes off with Ichigo's body and causes a bunch of trouble, but once captured at the end, they decide to keep him since he would be killed. They name him Kon, and he lives in a plush lion-esque toy from this point on. This character sort of becomes the series mascot. In Volume 3, the story finally starts to move. We learn that Ichigo's mother died and are introduced to the Grand Fisher, a long-hunted hollow responsible for Masaki's death, Ichigo's mother. We also get a much deeper look into the Kurosaki family and how they are dealing with the death of Masaki. By the end, despite getting a major hit on Grand Fisher, Ichigo fails to kill him. We also see, at the very end, a glimpse into Grand Fisher losing his hollow mask and a couple other hollows that will appear much later on in the series. This scene is, for the most part, cut from the anime, but I think it lends itself pretty well to the manga, where we get a view into what's going to come much later as another plot point. And with Volume 4, the story stalls again. We're introduced to the worst character in the series, Don Kanoji. We spend the whole time stopping him from turning a hollow, or a spirit into a hollow, and though he's not doing it intentionally, by the end of the volume we meet Oryu Ishida, and that's pretty much the only thing of note in this entire volume. We meet Oryu Ishida, who's a Quincy, and he becomes the main character. Don Kanoji is basically useless to the story. We open Volume 5 with Ichigo stalking Uryu. After being stalked, Uryu challenges Ichigo to a contest at killing hollows. He uses hollow bait to draw hollows into the city. Ichigo realizes he has to protect his family and his friends, and we see Chad fight a hollow to help keep Karen out of harm, and this is when he awakens his powers, which is the right arm. We see Orihime fight a hollow and protect Tatsuki. This is when she awakens her powers, the Shujin Rika. She can create a shield to protect people, she can heal her friends, and then she can attack and defeat the hollow. This plot continues in the next volume, but it's very much the start to a bigger issue here. We start this volume, Volume 6, with Kisuke finding Chad and Orihime and taking them to rest, and then when they wake up, he takes them to see Ichigo fighting the hollows with Uryu. We see the Menos Grande ripping its way out of the sky, and Uryu and Ichigo work together to defeat this giant hollow. It's explained that this hollow is very, very powerful, and that it's unlikely that Ichigo and Uryu can defeat it. This leads to the Soul Society discovering where Rukia has been, and Renji and Byakuya, Rukia's older brother, show up to take her back to the Soul Society as a criminal. We also learned at this point that it was illegal by Soul Society rules for Rukia to give Ichigo her power. In Volume 7, we open exactly where we left off, with Oryu arriving to defend Rukia from her brother and Renji. We then cut to Ichigo trying to figure out where Rukia is and finding Kon behind a toilet. It's very funny, played for laughs. Kisuke arrives to Ichigo to turn him into a Soul Reaper so he can go after Rukia after finding a note that says she is leaving. Ichigo shows up to a defeated Uryu and begins to fight Renji. After getting a hit on Renji, Renji releases his Zanpakuto, tells Ichigo that, dear Zanpakuto has a name, and that it can change form, and proceeds to injure Ichigo pretty badly. Ichigo then gets a hit on Renji, and Byakuya steps in and shatters Ichigo's soul body vitals, the Saketsu chain, and the Hakusu soul sleep. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know if I pronounced that right. And then they then leave with Rukia. Kisuke shows up soon after to heal Ichigo and Uryu. Ichigo then decides to team up with Kisuke so that he can regain his Soul Reaper powers and go to Soul Society to save Rukia. We also see that Orihime and Chad will be training with Yoruichi, who was introduced around the same time, and Uryu will be training by himself. In Volume 8, we open with Ichigo training, and also see the others training. After almost becoming a Hollow, and an appearance from Ichigo's Zanpakuto spirit, which we still have yet to learn the name of, Ichigo emerges as a Soul Reaper. Though he's wearing the Hollow Mask, he removes it quickly, and it's seen to not be a big deal. He almost transformed, but did not fully transform. He then trains for a while by fighting Kisuke, who eventually cuts what was left of his sword down to pieces, and Ichigo is forced to learn his Zanpakuto's name, thus releasing his Shikai, Zangetsu. And from this point on, Ichigo and Kisuke just fight for several days as part of his training. They go to a fireworks festival towards the end of the volume, and that little slice of life chapter sort of ends this first arc with them walking towards the Soul Society. Now, my thoughts. The first arc for Bleach is kind of boring, honestly. It's not the best, but that's a common problem in long-running shonen manga. There's just a lot of information needs to be given, and there's not really a lot of time for a really strong plot. You'll see this in most shows, Naruto, Hunter x Hunter, or Hunter x Hunter, whatever it's called. You see it in a lot of shows, and a lot of manga. The first arc tends to be not great, because you have to kind of learn a lot about the series, what's going to happen, what all these different things, and it just makes it a little boring. It's very Monster of the Week feeling, where every chapter kind of just has its own little plot, or each volume will have one little plot, so it's about 10 chapters or so that make up one plot, but they don't really seem to connect. The biggest example of this is Volume 4, I believe, the Dankanoji one. Nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens that entire volume. You do get a little bit of world building, and that's the whole point of this first arc, is you get a lot of world building. But as far as the plot moving forward, Dankanoji means absolutely nothing to the series. He's not seen again until way into the Arrancar arc. Not even the Arrancar arc, not even the Arrancar arc. Really, you see him in the fake Karakura Town arc, and that's a bit of a spoiler. But anyway. He's not seen for a very long time, at least not in any meaningful way, and even then it's not meaningful, and most people just hate it that he showed up in general. So it was unimportant. I feel like that wouldn't have been as egregious, though, if it didn't come right after the Grand Fisher volume. Volume 3 is by far the best volume in this little substitute Soul Reaper arc. In finding out how Ichigo and his family deals with their mother's death, finding out that Ichigo feels responsible for it. I don't want to say is responsible for it, feels responsible for it. Finding out she was killed by a Hollow, the Hollow's Grand Fisher. Ichigo gets to fight the Hollow. It's very good. It's very well done. And I think most importantly, he doesn't win. It might sound kind of weird, like, he doesn't lose, he doesn't get killed or anything, but he doesn't take out Grand Fisher. Grand Fisher survives and actually goes to, we don't really see where he goes. We know now he goes to Hoikumundo, but we don't really know where he's going at this point. And he gets his mask ripped off, and he just looks completely different. And again, this is foreshadowing to what's going to happen later, like down the line. But we see that he survived, and that he has a different look, a different appearance. We can assume that that's some kind of change, but we don't know what. A quick note, this is actually cut from the anime, sort of. They kind of don't show it in this beginning part, but then it's brought up back way later when it actually becomes relevant. But but it really helps the manga feel like it was more planned out than it probably actually was, because we see that, and then it's brought back to us later to introduce the next major plot line following the Soul Society. The next major part of this arc is the contest between Uryu and Ichigo, and again, that's really, really well done. Uryu comes off kind of like a jackass, to be honest, but I like that. He's not necessarily a bad person, and he's never really seen as a villain, but he's kind of an asshole, and that works for what he is and what he eventually becomes, or what you see of the Quincy's later on. It's during this battle that we get Chad developing his powers, and he gets his big, massive arm thing. We don't really know what it is. We don't know what kind of powers they are. It's not Quincy powers, but it's not Soul Reaper powers. He's not a hollow. We don't know what he is. We also get Orihime's powers introduced. The Shun Shun Rika, her little hair thingies, become little living creatures, and they can heal people and create a shield, and the one can, like, as a projectile that attacks things, which is pretty cool. Most of that doesn't really come up. The shield, it comes in here and there, and the healing people is very prominent throughout the series, because of course it is. And they're actually introduced as little characters, which is adorable, because most of them are, you know, pretty funny, and it creates a little dynamic there, almost like she's talking to herself, but they don't last forever. For the most part, they're kind of gone by midway through the series. The very last part of the arc is the introduction of Byakuya Kuchi and Renji Ibarra to capture Rukia as a criminal. Byakuya is her brother, and she flees. It leads to Ichigo having to catch her, and Ichigo is defeated by Byakuya. He loses his Soul Reaper powers at that point. Renji does introduce, I don't think it's called Shikai at this point, but he introduces Shikai and the naming of his Zanpakuto and the transformation and everything, which is really cool because that's one of the biggest parts of the series. So that's really good to see at the end. And then the training at the end is pretty good. Ichigo learns his Shikai, and we get to see Urahara fight a little bit, which is nice. Chad and Orihime also undergo training with Yoruichi, and Uryu trains by himself, and then we end the arc with them all running into the tunnel to head to Soul Society. Some side notes for the series. This mostly pertains to the actual manga volumes, though. I really like the poems at the beginning of each volume. I think they're nice. They're not all great or anything like that, but they're fun, and it's nice to see. This is something Kubo does in his other work as well. I haven't read Burn the Witch yet, the spin-off to Bleach, but he does do it in Zombie Powder as well, and he continues it through Bleach, at least as far as I've read. Again, I haven't read the 1,000-Year Blood War arc or anything. I also really like the cover art for them. They're very well done. Nothing crazy, but it's just a character, but it's almost always, with the few exceptions. Looking at this one right here. It's almost always a character who had a big role in that volume, outside of the main character, which is nice. It makes for a more interesting appearance when they're all on the shelf, because you get a lineup of all the characters in that little sidebar, as opposed to something like, say, Naruto, where while every cover is individually interesting, the sidebar on it, which is what you see most of the time when you have a collection of manga volumes, is just a picture of Naruto's face, and it's like 70 pictures of Naruto's face, and then there's like the 6 or 7 that are Sasuke. This one, every character is individual, so it's nice. It's kind of like a nice middle ground between just taking the front cover like most manga do, when something like with Dragon Ball and I guess Dragon Ball Z, whatever, one series. Anyway, it's a nice middle ground between that, where like Dragon Balls is one long mural, so if you put them all together, it's one thing going across the whole way. So it's nice. It looks good on the shelf, if that matters to you. I don't know. It matters to me. I don't know if it matters to you. Final thoughts. The first arc is solid. It has that shonen pacing of that early arc that we talked about earlier, but it's not bad by any means. It's definitely one of the better ones, especially with the action. Every volume has its action. It's all very well done. And Kubo's art style is very, very good. Although I think it gets better as we go on, which makes sense. It's really sharp here, so the fight scenes really work for this. And his character design is really, really good. So every character looks distinct, even though they're just minor-ish characters. The hollows all look really good and menacing, which is fun. That really does lend to the series being a little bit more enjoyable, more engaging, because every villain looks unique. Can't wait to read part 2. It's been a very long time since I've really paid much attention to Bleach. Obviously, the series ended 7 years ago, but I stopped reading it right around the last arc we talked about, the Lost Agent arc. Not that it got bad or anything like that. I don't want people it didn't get bad. I just kind of grew out of reading manga. I guess grew up's not the best way to say that. I got distracted with other things. I was coming out of high school, and real life and shit like that. So I kind of fell out of it, but going back and watching it now and reading it now, it's nice. I do really like Kubo's work, so it's good to see again. And I forgot how good Bleach can be when it's simplified, and this is very simple Bleach. Later on, things get really overcomplicated. There's dozens of characters. One of Kubo's, this is a quote from him, when he doesn't know what to do for the story, he either goes back and rereads Bleach, which, fair, you give your own best advice sometimes, or he just creates new characters en masse. And that's kind of what happens. As the series goes on, we just get new faction after new faction. We get tons of new characters, which is great because they're all really good and well done, and they all look good, and they're all very unique. It's really good. As you get later in the story, I keep saying good, but it's really well done as you get later in the series. But then by the end, there's so many characters that you want to see that it becomes bloated. And every part just starts to take so long because you don't want to just have 3 or 4 fights. You need 34 fights, and it becomes a little much. It becomes a little much. But at this point, it's really just Ichigo and Rukia versus the Hollows. You get a couple characters introduced with powers like Orihime and Chad, and eventually Oryu towards the end. But it's very small, and they don't do a whole lot of fighting, so it's very simplified, which is it's nice. Thanks for watching.